Imagine your friend tells you they asked ChatGPT for relationship advice instead of you. How would you feel? That's what we're going to talk about today on Relational Lives, and also whether we're likely to be out of a job due to AI. Please, as usual, we want you to subscribe to our channel, wherever you're listening or watching this. It really does help to get the word out there. And we do love to hear from you. So comments are greatly appreciated. Hi, Roz.
Hi, Ali. So this is an interesting subject, isn't it? And also something that perhaps is, that, like you say, could impact us in some ways in
I
terms of
think
our
it
professions.
already is impacting us.
Do you?
Yeah.
What have you
definitely.
noticed?
I've noticed clients that will come and say, oh, I asked ChatGPT about this, and this is what they said. I noticed myself feeling a little bit, oh.
What,
How
a bit
dare
put
you?
out?
How dare you go and ask ChatGPT when you're coming here?
And did you
Then I'll
find
go
out
on
of interest?
ChatGPT and say, is it okay for my client to...
And in terms of what they were asking, was there a theme in terms of the type of things that people were asking?
No, I can't remember specifically but it's around the things that they're struggling with, the personal problems that they're having, or a question about the personal problem that they're having. But
Okay, so it might be about the relationship or what they're, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it's such a big thing now, isn't it? It's absolutely taken off.
It has. People mention on so many different platforms, don't they, about ChatGPT? What is it? I can't even say it.
Nobody can actually say it.
No, ChatGPT. GPT. Even I'm muddling. Yeah, well, we use a different one, don't we? Because we do use it, but we don't necessarily use it in the same way that we're talking about today.
No, well, I do sometimes.
Do you? Okay,
Yeah,
so
I've
you do
used it.
use it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there you were criticising your clients.
No,
Thankfully, you're using it as
completely
well.
hypocritical.
That's so funny.
And just to be clear, I wasn't criticising my client. I was having a thought that I was able to park, realising it's irrational.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're very, very popular now, aren't they? These AI websites. I think there's some specific AI apps that you can use for this kind of thing, like it's your companion.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't tried that.
So interesting.
Maybe I will actually.
Yeah, I think I don't. I think I use it for certain things, but not in terms of advice relationally. So I might use it for writing an email or something that I've got to do a formal email, or and I would want to have that put in a better way. Yeah. I sometimes use it when we're kind of thinking about what we're going to talk about on the podcast, and sort of get different ideas from that. So I will use it in that way, whereas I feel a bit dinosaurish in terms of how else I would use it, but I appreciate that it's all over the place, that people are using it.
It can be quite addictive because it's so easy to just say, oh, I'll just put it in. I mean, even if you put it in a Google now, it's AI, isn't it? Unless you tell it not to, I think. But it's so easy to just automatically think, oh, I don't need to think about that. I'll just AI it. And I'm very aware of that. I don't want to stop using my brain.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And especially as that's a really helpful thing for older age, isn't it? Making sure we are. It's like, what's going to happen if we just
keep those brain cells working?
Yeah. I think what's really important to say is that this is just a conversation we're having about this. We are not experts at all in this field.
No.
And
I would love to speak to an expert, actually. Yeah,
so perhaps we can do that at a later time, find somebody who knows much more about it than we do. But I think it's just about a gentle conversation, isn't it, around people's use of it, particularly perhaps linked to our work and how people are feeling and what their thoughts are maybe, and what they use it for, as you've already sort of mentioned.
So I put together a short survey and shared it with my friends and put it on my social media for people to answer. with some questions, and it was quite interesting. I mean, there's only 29 responses because I didn't think about it in advance enough, but it was quite telling, I think. And we will refer to that throughout this, that it's showing, how many people are using it out of the 29 that did answer it. But also some of their individual responses were quite interesting and thought-provoking. So we'll weave that into this conversation.
Good. I think that would be helpful and interesting. And I suppose it's also basing that in the questions that you asked, so it was specifically, wasn't it around sort of relationship advice or
Personal
much more
issues.
personal issues? Yeah, exactly.
How are people using AI? Because it can be used for pretty much anything that human beings would think about or want to know about, isn't it?
I certainly think in terms of things like medicine, I know that when I have got a letter or something from a medical person, a hospital appointment or whatever, and not just an appointment, but the results of something, that the language that's used can be so kind of complicated and clinical, that can be a sort of almost a translation into human language, can't it?
Okay, yeah. Not done that, but I can see how that would work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What other instances?
Someone on the survey put about medical problems that they've put that in AI, and it's been really helpful to give advice.
That's interesting. What's the actual medical problem? So thinking that they're experiencing something and then putting in what their symptoms are. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know. It didn't say specifically, but I would imagine people do.
Which is a dangerous one, I guess, isn't it? Because if AI is pulling on all the information from the web, as it were, everything that has been put in there, there are going to be an awful lot of options. And I guess people could feel fearful if something comes up that is perhaps not what they want to hear, or something that's, tricky.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with any kind of Googling or anything, isn't it?
But I wonder if there becomes a reliance, the fact that it's now AI, I wonder if it takes it further than just a Google search.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine it does, doesn't it? Because there's it's so much more comprehensive. And the way it says it as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later, won't we? Because we've got an example in of a problem and what it brings up and what we've noticed about that. But it's so comprehensive and so speaks like it's got that empathy and very reassuring.
Yeah, and coming up with then solutions to help. So it's that sort of mix, isn't it, of those different bits that it provides. And I guess I'm thinking of people also who might be on their own, or who do struggle, even if they're having therapy in between, or lots of thoughts going on and caught up in rumination. I wonder what that's like for them to be able to try and find some kind of answer in that way that isn't human, but like you say, adds that element of reassurance and a little sprinkling of empathy and whatever.
Whenever I've put a question into AI, and it will say, "That's a great question," and I think, "Oh, thanks."
So it's really validating, isn't it? Like,
Thank
builds you up.
I thought it was a good question as well.
It does do that, doesn't it? When I've put in a suggestion of a subject perhaps to talk about on the podcast, and I'll say, to psychotherapists talking about, can you give us an idea on what it would be like to talk about this? Do you think that would be a good idea, kind of thing? It says, that's a great idea for two psychotherapists to talk about. Again, it comes in like that. What a good subject. That'll be so helpful for everybody.
Yeah, so if this is a shit episode, blame AI on that.
Oh dear, that's so funny. So how else might people use it, do you think?
Oh, I think there's all kinds of ways, isn't there? But let's focus on what we're talking about here, where people are turning to an AI app or website for their personal problems, who they normally might or might not turn to another friend or family member for. Because Yeah. And that's the worry for us. So are we going to be out of a job? Are we going to be losing clients? Are people going to be getting that from their computer or device?
Yes. Yeah. And do you think that makes a difference as well in terms of what I've noticed when looking a little bit into this, that a lot of the advice often refers to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy type
Mm-hmm.
um, information or advice, as I said,
Mm.
and I'm wondering, is there, because there are obviously all sorts of different therapies, aren't there, and different approaches, and
Mm.
I wonder if there are going to be fewer people, therefore, going for CBT specifically because it often refers to it.
Mm. Or the opposite. It might encourage more people to go for CBT because it's referring to it.
It might.
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows? It's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? But I
Yeah.
wonder, in terms of, if I think of how I work, and it's all the difference with what's not there is this relational stuff.
Mm.
It's this relationship with a therapist,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
of which has been known and researched to be such a key element to a part of the changing process for people.
Mm. And that is the other person being in the room. It's the body language. It's the facial expressions, because I don't know, there's a percentage, isn't there, of what communication is nonverbal, but it's a high percentage of communication is
Mm-hmm.
nonverbal. It's the tone,
Mm-hmm.
a voice. There's so many nuances within what's said as well.
Well, and it's conversation.
And it's, yeah,
As
the
there's
flow.
a flow of conversation. It's a dialogue. It's between one or two or three, depending on whether they're couples or individuals or groups.
Mm-hmm.
There's interaction, basically, isn't there?
Mm.
There's an interactive. Even if there are silences, those silences can be felt and can
Yeah.
be understood and
Yeah.
reflected upon.
Mm-hmm.
Which you're not getting from a computer and an AI
No,
experience.
no.
You're getting a one-sided thing, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of that can come across as compassionate and understanding and all those
Mm-hmm.
pieces, but there's a lot missing, isn't there? And that the nervous systems in the room, the two bodies in the room, and that idea of what's called co-regulation,
Mm-hmm.
someone else's nervous system being present and being able to help regulate the others. That's not yet possible through AI. I say yet because who knows?
Well, indeed. And I know there's been even films and things. I remember watching a film around someone having a relationship with an operating system. I don't know whether you've seen that
No, I
film,
haven't seen that one.
but that's again a curious, and it's quite a long time ago, so it was kind of ahead of its time in some
Mm.
respects as to what's happening now. And I think there's somebody who was speaking recently on the news, I think, or there was a report of somebody who had married somebody, an operating system, effectively, so a character that had been invented on AI, which is extraordinary, I'd say.
Married, married.
There was some kind of relationship that was, I mean, I can't remember exactly because it would have been drifting in the background, but it struck me that something was really unusual about this, that, of course it wasn't a formal thing, but
Yeah,
that they had developed this relationship, developed a sort of created a character, if you like,
yeah,
to be able to have a relationship with.
yeah. You can imagine it. You can imagine it, can't you? Because it would be so easy for a character to be built within the AI, and for that character to perfectly sort of fit what the other person wants to see or hear or be validated about, or, and that bond is then created. Obviously, it's not
Mm.
a real bond, but I'm just thinking about also things like parasocial relationships, or relationships formed over the internet where maybe they haven't even seen each other, but they're just messaging. It can be such a powerful feeling of a bond. But
And that could reflect very much on people's experiences of their own attachment growing up, couldn't it? That if there is a lack,
mm,
perhaps in certain areas growing up, how that need, that unmet need, is then somehow qualified in that relationship
mm,
with AI.
mm, and there's no risk. There's no you're not likely to be
Hmm.
challenged. AI isn't likely to have a moan at you for leaving your socks on the floor.
Hmm. No.
It's not human, so it can be perfect for you.
And I wonder, in the element of that, if it's very sort of like you were saying that, great question, the validation, feeling more worth, feeling like you're more significant, that sort of building up and how sustainable that is. And
Mm,
whether, when you were saying it could perhaps be quite addictive, whether there's that need then to return and return and return, because fundamentally, is that really building up that sense of worth, or is it a fragile, externalized approval that you're getting?
yeah, maybe we should ask AI.
Yeah.
I was just thinking.
Yeah.
So we've got a voice note, haven't we, from someone who has found it incredibly helpful by the sounds of it.
Yes. Shall we play that?
Yeah, let's play it now.
Hi, my name is Liz and I am 54 and I was separated about 20 months ago. Um, I have never been someone who would have relied on any kind of online platform for something like relationship advice or personal advice, even. I'm quite open and I have good friends, and I've had a therapist actually for over a year who I'm very happy with. However, two really important points. For someone who is on the ADHD spectrum and has quite scattered thoughts and can struggle being concise, I found the immediacy of AI's advice really helpful, and the way that it just can fine tune what I want to say, especially when it came to um, writing messages to people with an emotional content. And so that was that. I find it's also this immediacy really, really helpful, because a therapist is once a week and friends are busy. And sometimes I just needed some advice there and then. I found it also very easy to um, copy speak my points and could add all the contextual details about my life, and they and AI will really, really quickly ascertain all of that and help, therefore giving me responses that are very personal. It felt personal and fine-tuned to my needs. It's eternally positive and encouraging and helpful and kind, and you just feel so sort of loved, which in your logical brain it is AI, but equally it can be really lovely. So those are the things that I found really useful, and I'm very happy to speak to you further, but I don't want to ramble on too much on this message. But I'll be very interested to hear the discussion you have on this topic. Thank you very much.
So thanks to Liz for sending that voice note in, because it's really helpful, isn't it, to have somebody's lived experience of it, as it were.
Mm,
How in her world
mm.
it sounds like it has been a really positive thing for her, alongside therapy.
Yeah, there's an added piece in there, isn't it? An added support system for her.
Hmm.
My concern about some of the AI stuff is how much information it starts to know about us.
Yes, good point.
If you're telling it all your personal information, there's an element for me that's a little bit worrying.
Big brotherish in a way.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
And what that will lead to.
hmm Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
guess this is a really important point, isn't it? Is that in our work, often we're dealing with lots of elements of vulnerability in
Mm,
people. And so I can see that, in Liz's instance, for her, she was talking also about the sort of element of neurodiversity, and that it helped her be more concise in her thinking and think things through, and also liking that empathic element that we were talking about earlier. However, I think it is that piece of vulnerability. It's like, what if somebody is really vulnerable or feeling particularly vulnerable at a certain time? Maybe in some situations that can be a helpful and reassuring thing and calm and regulate the nervous system in a little bit of a way, some way. But what if it doesn't?
What if it doesn't work? Where does that go then? What are you saying, Ros? What's your...
Well, I just worry that it's leaving people more fragile and not supported enough to manage that. And, if people don't necessarily have friends available, and it's a difficult one because also people might not have the funds for therapy, but it's about how people are perhaps not knowing or learning how to reach out to human beings. And bearing in mind we're relational, we are sort of wired in some respects for connection, then what kind of connection is it that is different with AI to the connection we're getting with human contact? And so that concerns me, I suppose. And I want people to be safe.
Well, it leaves people more alone, doesn't it, in a way? If that's what people are turning to more and more, leaves them even more alone.
Yeah, which might also then, you were saying earlier that you then go back into it sort of becomes maybe a little bit addictive or have a tendency to have that sort of addictive quality, that's not then again solving anything. It's just going back to try and get a quick fix. And that's, I think, the difference as well, isn't it? Which therapy isn't.
Yeah.
It's about a long-term result, if you like, rather than a quick fix, which is temporary and then it's going to kind of break down again.
Yeah, reassuringly, most people on that survey said that they either wouldn't use AI for a personal problem or they would use it as a helpful addition to talking to other people.
So yes, with Liz's message, she was very aware, wasn't she? She said, I know with my rational mind it's AI.
Yeah.
And so it sounds that similar to the survey, isn't it? That people are keeping their kind of rational thinking, logical part of their brain active, even though there is also this part of them that's going towards trying to find some kind of answer.
And of all the people that said that they'd used it for a personal problem, which was not that many, I think it was about half, they all found it helpful.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
We'd
have to find out much more, wouldn't we, about the detail of that, in what way they found it helpful. But just as a broad result, isn't that interesting?
It's people would saying it was reassuring, or it confirmed what they thought, or it gave some useful resources or ideas.
So giving them something to go away with, and it sounds practical.
Practical and information.
Along with the reassurance.
Yeah. I've certainly found it helpful. I mean, it's not, I would still talk to other people, but like Liz said, if you're in the moment and you're thinking, oh, what should I do about this?
And then that's when you would put that in, and then you would get some kind of instant answer or option as to what you could do, suggestion.
Yeah. And of course, the validation of I'm amazing. That's a fantastic question.
Yeah, you're so great. That lovely massage rub of our ego. Yeah.
Let's bring in the problem that we put into AI.
So we put in, didn't we, that we were perhaps somebody who was experiencing social anxiety. We didn't use that terminology. We used it just that we were finding it really increasingly difficult going out and going to parties, and feeling more anxious and finding that we were avoiding doing anything, and that was happening more and more. So that was the kind of question we put in. What can we do to help ourselves in this?
Yeah. And it was reassuring. This is, you're not the only one. This happens to people. you're not doing anything wrong. It was
And
very
also that it sounds
validating.
really tough. Yeah, that
Sounds
sounds
really
so
tough.
tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is things that we might say, isn't it? In therapy, we might say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that sounds, having that empathic response.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that comes up first, doesn't it? I noticed that there was that kind of order, wasn't there? Of first, it starts with empathy, and then
Yes.
that bit of validation
Yes.
and reassurance.
Yeah. And then the understanding of what that might be about. So it talked about social anxiety, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then what you can do about it. So it started to say you could start by going, instead of going to a party, just go to a coffee shop. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the point. And I thought, well, hang on, this is missing a whole chunk of what you need to also look at within that. Where has it come from? What's your understanding of it? What are the thoughts that are feeding this? What are the beliefs behind all this about yourself, about other people? There's so many other pieces of that puzzle that it wasn't necessarily bringing in, wasn't it?
Yeah. And that's a really key, isn't it? Because that gives you, a really good understanding of how different it is being in therapy with a therapist, and
Yeah.
how that unpicking and extraction of trying to understand and being curious together and
Mm,
working through all of those things. Whereas there isn't that relational thing, in that it's giving you some very useful steps
yeah.
once you have done that, but it's like you say, missing that whole part, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot, but it was some good stuff in there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Creating a hierarchy, thinking about your safety behaviors. We're going to be doing an episode, I think it's coming out next week, on social anxiety. So yeah, stay tuned for that one. So yeah, some
Yes.
useful stuff. It's I think helpful.
I think it's helpful, and I think there is, like you say, this piece that's missing, and this piece that's missing also about the feelings and learning around what it is that's going on inside you and how to be able to tolerate those more,
Mm,
and that being the sort of part of combining those steps, that would be what would be worked towards with therapy.
yeah.
That actually being in a space with somebody with really difficult feelings can be a really helpful
Yeah.
thing to experience.
Yeah. And co-creating some ideas around what can change, be coming together and be collaborative. And like you said, curious together.
Yeah.
It's
And that's not what you're getting in AI. You're not getting curiosity together. You're
yeah.
getting a bit of empathy, a bit of reassurance. Great, great question. And then going through various different steps. And also I thought what was interesting is I noticed it also put in, if you are feeling really troubled. It was almost like a safety warning
Yeah.
that you need to make sure you get the right kind of help, professional help. So it did add that too.
Yeah. Which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think we're going to be out of a job, Roz?
I don't think we're going to be out of a job, because I think, well, it depends, doesn't it? It depends on how far it's developed.
Yeah.
And it depends on, it does concern me. I mean, when we were talking about this before, you were mentioning about, well, what if EMDR, for instance, comes into an AI? So that's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is often used for quite significant traumas and difficult situations. So what happens if that starts to become an AI thing? Because people can come up, they can feel and experience all sorts of really difficult emotions through that process, because that's
Mm,
part of it.
mm,
It's part of releasing the emotion in order to be able to work through it and put it into sort of longer term memory. And so I am concerned at the safety around it.
mm.
And I'm concerned that those considerations might not be thought about in the development of it, because I don't know who is developing it
Yeah.
in terms of therapy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a concern I have.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you think we're going to be out of a job?
I hope not, because I love what I do. You love what you do. I
Yeah,
really don't want to be out of a job.
yeah.
And
M- And we also know that there's a real benefit because we witness it, we experience it, we have those relationships with people.
Yeah.
We see how that can, how it can be effective because it's relational.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can
Definitely.
even, that doesn't have to be in the same room. We do a lot of online work as well, but there is still the relationship. We're still, and I always think even with online work, actually, we're kind of closer together, a bit like we are
Yeah.
now. We're sort of sitting closer together in a way. So there is, even though there's some cues that we might not see, there's an intimacy about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the space we're offering, this very safe, sort of intimate space where people can start exploring and understanding themselves and getting real relational feedback around that.
So I don't think we'll be out of a job.
No, I don't think we will. I don't think we will in some ways, you could say it would be great to be out of a job if people didn't have any mental health issues or worries and everybody was kind of okay. But that would be a very artificial world that we would be living in.
Yeah.
Ironically.
I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah, no.
Do let us know your thoughts on this. If you use it for your own personal problems, whether you found it helpful or whether it's done any harm, do let us know.
Yeah, we would be really interested. And just remember to like and subscribe and follow us. We want to try and get this out to as many people as we can. So we want that that would be really helpful. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye, Roz.
Bye, Ali.